Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Running for Souls podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I'm really glad to have you along listening in today, wherever it is that you're listening, whenever it is that you might be listening in. I hope it's while you're out there tackling some big run. Maybe it's a race. Maybe you're just training for something. Maybe it's just for fun. And hopefully these conversations that I share with you might just make that running a little bit easier, if only for just a little bit. But I think today's conversation might do that for you. I had the chance to recently interview Whitney Richman. She's a local Richmond runner here. She recently tackled some big challenges on the local Capitol Trail that we're going to dig into and talk about, but it is a fascinating conversation. It really digs into life, but more importantly for me, these conversations are always about digging into the parallels between running and life and how they really work together to serve one another well and really make us better people, better runners. And so this conversation with Whitney really does that. Before I turn you over to our conversation, I do want to talk just a minute about Running for Souls and the importance of us gathering up our old shoes, gathering up the shoes we don't want and getting them to Soles for Souls. So you can go to my website, Running for Souls, running the number 4, SOLES, as in the shoes, runningforsouls.com. Click on, there's a tab especially for how to contribute shoes. You can learn all about how you can get those shoes donated. I have worked closely with Soles for Souls for the last couple of years. I have seen the impact that our unwanted are still plenty of use in them shoes. I've seen what they can do to transform the lives of those who are living in systemic and really critical poverty. So again, go to the website, Running for Souls, RUNNING, number 4, SOLES.com. Click on the Contribute Shoes tab and figure out how, especially runners, we go through these shoes and they aren't great for running anymore, but there is plenty of use left in them. Don't let them end up in a landfill when they can change the lives of people who are living in chronic poverty. With that, I am going to turn you over to my conversation with Whitney Richman.
I want to welcome Whitney Richman to the show. So welcome, Whitney.
Thank you.
So we're going to dive into some pretty incredible running feats on your part. Before we get there, though, I'm curious. I'm always curious because I just started, running 5 or 6 years ago at 50 years old. So I'm always curious how people get started with this whole running thing. So when did you get started and how?
When did I get started? Well, so I was a competitive cheerleader in high school and college, and it was my whole life, it was after school, at night, and I think after I graduated from college, I was kind of searching for something else that I could really get into. And one of my best friends, I was living in Chicago at the time, she came to run the Chicago Marathon, and I watched her run it. And I was like, well, heck, if she can do this. I mean, we used to run together in college just for fun, a couple miles. I'm like, if she could do this, I could do this. So I signed up the next week maybe for the next Chicago Marathon. And that was 2005. And I trained with a group, a local marathon training group in Chicago. And I did it. I loved it. And then I did 5 the next year. And then I just got bored with marathons. And so I tried the ultra marathons.
Now, so that first Chicago Marathon, were there any races between that, oh, I can do this, and then that, or did you just train for it and that was your first deal, or?
I have a very vivid memory of doing a 10-mile run. It was on the lakefront and it was cold out. But other than that, I don't remember doing any races. I may have done a few, I don't know. But yeah, I used to do more halves and 10Ks and things like that. But then after a couple of years of marathons, I didn't want to do something, what I consider at the time short stuff. Right. So yeah, I haven't done a shorter race in a long time.
What was it then? So I'm curious. What was it about the marathon that made you curious about further distances? I mean, not everybody gets there. Not everybody
Right,
runs a marathon and says, "Oh, I think I want to run further." In fact,
right.
probably more people say, "I don't ever want to do this again."
Yeah. um, I think that I liked, it's definitely the challenging myself. And I, I remember running the Boston Marathon, I think it was 2010, and I finished, and usually I had this high from the marathon, right? And I was like, oh, that was great. And I was kind of like, okay, what's next? And I felt like I wanted to see what I could do. I've always kind of been like trying to push myself, and it's not necessarily about pushing myself against other people, but to see what I personally can do. So I think that was what it really was. And also the community. The marathon community is great, and I really enjoy being around all those people. But then when I discovered there was this ultra community out there, and it was so welcoming, I really latched onto that.
Yeah, I'll probably revisit that because
Okay.
I have fallen in love with that ultra and trail community really myself. You said something, and so I interviewed Meg Landymore last week, and it was before
Mhm.
she was getting ready to attempt the fastest known time, Scar and back. I didn't even know what that was at the time, but it was 72 miles across the Appalachian Trail in the Smokies and then turn around and come back. So it's about
Oh
100,
yeah, awesome.
142 miles. And I asked her, like, why? You know, why?
Yeah.
What is it that makes you want to do that? And she answered something similar to you. She said, I'm just always real curious how far my body will go without
Right.
breaking. And then when it breaks, see how I can put it back together and do more. And you said almost the exact same thing. Where does that come from? You said you were in competitive cheering all your life. Was
Hmm.
this was this something you were born with? Did somebody put this in you? Are you like putting this in your kids right now? What gets
Um,
somebody to this point where they just have to keep seeing what they can do?
yeah, that's so funny. I've never really thought about that. I think it's it's a combination for me. I have a twin sister, and I have a very active mother. And growing up, we were always doing all kinds of sports. I did competitive cheerleading, but my sister was probably in like 4 sports. So I think partly is, and I have a younger sister as well. And I think it's partly always doing sports and seeing what you could do. So that's probably part of it. Maybe a little bit of is, yes, I was born with it, but I think that the environment probably fostered it a little bit more. And then I don't, that's a very good question that I've never actually thought about.
It's funny because, and maybe you'll have similar or no, Meg's kids they're pretty close to your kids' age too. I think her oldest was 6,
Uh-huh.
and she said it frustrates her because it's like she doesn't see a competitive bone in his body. So I'm curious if yours are old enough, whether you're sensing any of that or they're too
Well,
young.
my daughter, the 2-year-old, she definitely seems to have a little bit of an adventurous competitive streak, but I don't know if that's just the situation where my son is there, and she has to compete with him to get attention, to do what he jumps off of a couch and she wants to do it too, type of thing. But I think that she's definitely going to have this athletic competitive streak in her. My son, maybe not so much, but he definitely enjoys running around and riding his bike and quote racing us.
Well, so this see how far you can go, push yourself this year led to, so if I read it right, you were training for several races this year, and
Mhm.
like every racer in the country, all your races were canceled. So you were well trained and kind of trying to figure out what to do. And so you're here in Richmond.
Mhm.
So you decided to try the fastest known time on the Capitol Trail one way.
Yes.
And then you did it. And so I guess that wasn't quite good enough for you. So you turned around a couple of months later and did the fastest known time out and then back. So
Yeah.
for folks who don't know, out is about, I guess, almost 52 miles. And then
Right.
out and back is a little over 103, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Relatively, yes.
So you went out, you did almost 52 miles in 7 hours and 41 minutes, which is about the time it took me to run my first marathon in Richmond, for some perspective. And then you did the out and back in about 17 and a half hours. I mean,
Yeah.
all of that is really, really impressive. Why? Where did, I'm going to keep asking you why. So because I'm always curious what is somebody doing when they say, I think I'll just see if I can run the Capitol Trail faster than anybody has.
Right. Well, so I have a coach, Patrick Reagan. I don't know if you have heard of him, but he's a sponsored athlete from Hoka. And I started working with him December, and I was training for a Pistol 100, which is near Knoxville, Tennessee. And it was canceled like the week before in March. And he said, well, you're trained up. Think about, is there anything you want to do? Even if it's run a really fast 5K. And I was like, no. And he's like, well, just think about it. And I took a couple of days, and then it hit me. I thought, well, I don't know why I didn't think about this sooner, but I've always wanted to run the length of the Capitol Trail from Richmond to Williamsburg. I had run on it a couple times, pushing my kids in the stroller. I don't know if you've ever been down there, but the part where it goes under the train tracks and they can see the train right above. And I always was like, oh, I really should run this sometime, but it was never a good time because I had races. And so I was like, well, this is a perfect time to do it. So I started with the one way, and I decided to do it self-supported. So I stashed some water and Coke like halfway through, and I just had my husband and my kids pick me up at the end. This is the very beginning of when everything shut down. So I didn't want to involve anybody else at the time, my husband wasn't very comfortable even coming out to help me. So, which I totally understood. And so I just said, okay, well, I'll just do this by myself. And I just had a mask, a buff or something around my face, ready around my face if somebody came too close. And I just went and did it. And he said, as soon as I finished, he pulled up in the car probably like 2 minutes after I finished. And he's like, how was it? I said, it was great. I did it. And he's like, okay. He took a couple pictures, and he said he looked at me and he knew. He's like, I knew you were going to tell me you're going to do it out and back right after you finished. Like, yeah. So I thought about it for a couple weeks, and I told my coach, and he's like, great, let's go for it. So, because I didn't have anything else on the schedule, and I was all trained up and ready to run a 100-miler, and I figured, why not? So when I did the out and back, though, I did have a couple friends from marathon training coaching that I do for sports backers. I had a couple of my friends come out and help me. So it was hot out too. So that was very helpful because they could bring me ice and stuff.
Yeah, I think I read that was June or around Father's Day.
June,
so...
Yes, it was like the week before. I wanted to run it the week before Father's Day, so the next weekend I could give my husband a lot of time to have Father's Day
right
to himself.
Yeah, that would have been June on the Capitol Trail. That would have been a hot experience.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was probably like 90. It wasn't oppressive, but it was definitely. I didn't realize how exposed the Capitol Trail is until I ran that day, because when I did the one way, I had left earlier, and also the sun was at different spots that I didn't really think about. So I was running, and I'm like, I thought there was shade coming up, and there was no shade and no shade and no shade. So yeah, it was hot, but I don't mind hot weather if I'm prepared for it.
Oh, I couldn't be any more opposite. The heat,
Yeah.
like now is like, to me, this is running. I went out today and ran. It's a complete, I don't even know why they call it running when you do this in the summer in the heat, and it's like a completely different sport that I don't even recognize. So this 100-mile thing, like, you're no stranger to that. you qualified for the 24-hour national team, I guess back in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
You ran almost 134 miles
Mm-hmm.
24 hours.
Yeah.
You know, you hear things like that, and I can't even fathom it.
Well, the funny thing is, you say I can't even fathom it, but then I think about people who are on the team or were on the team and ran. So I was the number 8 spot, second alternate, and there were 6 women that actually went to the World Championships. And I think, oh, I can't even I'm like, oh, I just ran 134 miles. They ran this many or something. So it's all relative.
What is the hardest part about? And I'm sure this is relative too. But what is the hardest part of tackling 100 miles? Is it? I mean, to me, mentally, I just ran a 38 mile. There's the longest race I ever run. It's 38 miles.
Oh wow! Congratulations.
Did the Georgia Jewel in Georgia.
Oh, that's a tough race.
Yes, it was I tried the 35 mile 2 years ago. Halfway, it was like 110 that day. Halfway through, I couldn't finish. Last year I was signed up, had all sorts of stuff. I didn't even show up. So this year I was like, I am getting this thing. So I did, but
that's awesome.
I mean, the whole second half of it just mentally was,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had to talk myself into every next step. So, So when somebody starts talking about 100 miles, I don't know, is for you, and you're clearly physically trained for that, but is it the physical piece, the mental piece? What is it?
No, it's like you, it's the mental piece. I have found it's interesting when I did that FKT in the Capitol Trail, I did not have a single negative thought the entire time. Almost all my other races, 100-mile races, I have had, usually from miles like 30 to 50, I get this negative, oh, this sucks, or like, I just want to get to 50 miles. Like once I get to 50 miles, I hit that 50.2 or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'm good to go. And it's like I turn a corner usually and I'm focused on the finish. But I go into that dark space where it's like, oh, if I could just trip and fall and hit my head, I wouldn't have to keep going.
Right.
Right. But yeah, that's something I've definitely worked on, is the mental piece. And yeah, you can be physically trained as much as you want, but if your head's not in it, then you are not going to, I mean, I wouldn't say you're not going to finish, but you're going to have a real tough time.
Now, when you say you work on that, what do you do to work on knowing that that's coming, knowing at mile 30 to 50, these voices are going to be nagging at me or trying to talk me to fall over and hit my head. What do you do? What do you do to work on that?
Well, some of it is in training. Like if I'm just having a bad run, just pushing, not like talking to myself, this is how you might feel like this during your race. And you like, don't try to push it away, welcome it, say, I know I feel really low right now, but it's going to get better. Kind of like trying to practice self-talk and talking myself through the rough patch. And then also just practice, like just having experience in races. I'm trying to think, I think it was my second 100-miler. I ran Umstead 100. And I had a very like dizzy, lightheaded spell from miles 40 to 50, and I almost dropped out at mile 50. And I just thought, oh, I can't go on. I feel like I'm going to pass out. And a couple people that I knew gave me some potato chips, and I even called my husband, who was at a different spot, and told him I'm stopping. And they got me to go back out again. They said, even if you just walk to the next aid station, just go back out. And so I did. He drove back to the spot and I was leaving. He was like, where are you going? I thought you were quitting. And I was like, no, I'm going to go back out. And I ended up finishing in a really good time. And, but I think I was more proud of the fact that I got over the mental, I'm quitting, and got back out there. And it's experiences like that you can build from in your next race when if I feel like that again, oh, I did this once before. I can get through this again. So I think I think it's important to also like go out. The weather's awful, it's raining, it's cold, the wind is blowing. Go out in those conditions because you don't want to, and prove to yourself that you can get it done when it really kind of sucks. And then that builds, you can pull on that, when you are in a race.
Yeah. Greg Armstrong, who runs a lot of,
Oh yeah, such a nice guy.
he is, I love Greg. I interviewed him some time ago, and he said
Mm-hmm.
something to me that it stuck with me, especially, this whole Georgia Jewel thing had been like my nemesis.
Uh-huh.
But he said, well, quitting is like a drug. It's like morphine. When you quit, all your pain goes away. Everything you're suffering through is done.
Yeah.
He said, and it can become addicting. So what you have to do is you have to collect these other experiences, like you just said. You have to go out and collect like these new drugs
Mm-hmm.
that you can take when you're out there and you're suffering, and you can lean on and draw on these times when you've made it.
Yeah.
And that has, so there have been times when I've been out there now and ready to quit, and I hear him saying, and I kind of hear it as don't do the morphine. It's not
That's
good
a really
for you.
good analogy, actually.
No, I had never thought of it that way, but because I had 2 or 3 times, I was like, oh yeah, no. I mean, in the moment, it was like, oh,
Yeah, it's hard because like I just ran Yeti 100, I think it was like a month ago, but I ended up dropping out. I had really severe stomach issues. And I thought to and it's a situation like that where I'm like, do I stay in here and do this for another 50 miles? And I mean, it was pouring rain and cold, so that didn't help the situation. But it was one of those moments where it's like, am I mentally being soft?
Right.
Or is this really a physical issue that is going to get me into a really bad physical place? And it's hard to, when you're at that point, it's hard to sometimes know the difference. And
well, especially after you just described a race where you like were ready to pass out and
right,
calling people, I'm quitting, and then you finish in a good time, and so it makes you wonder.
Right, exactly, yes, yeah. I did I did think about that. I was like, what if it gets better, and then I just start running really well again? So I don't know. You have to weigh. So I feel like, I don't know. I've dropped out of races I have asthma, and I've had to drop out of a few races because of asthma, like exacerbation or asthma attacks. And other than that, I haven't dropped out of any. But I don't know. Like some people have this. What do they call it? The DNF. Some people say do nothing fatal, but then I can't remember what the other thing they say the acronym is for. It's like, whether you have to crawl or just finish no matter what. And I'm not necessarily in the camp of finish no matter what. I think everybody has to do what's right for them. No, I'm not someone who says, oh, I'm just not feeling it, I'm going to stop. No, a legitimate medical reason, yes. But it's hard because it's like, you can convince yourself sometimes that something is a bigger deal than it is, especially if you're low on calories and dehydrated, and your brain maybe isn't functioning as well as it should be. So it's a very hard thing to navigate.
I'm curious, with all of that and the mental challenges and strengthening, how has that equipped you for this thing called life?
Oh man,
to the degree that they're different. Some days I'm like, I don't even know it's the same thing to me.
I agree. Oh, so I find so many similarities in running and ultra running as in life, and how you have to push past low points and bad days, and then there's good days, like just like in a race. And I was telling somebody the COVID situation, it's like a 100-mile race where you can't think about the finish. and you just have to take it like 5 miles at a time or 10 miles at a time. And it really, I think that running ultras especially, but in general, running in general, and pushing through some bad patches and stuff really, for me, helps me learn to adapt and deal with things that are thrown at me that aren't expected, or that, rough times, things like that. And with kids, I mean, nothing, especially with little kids.
That is the ultimate ultra race.
I know, right? I know. I'm like, and it's funny because I tell my coach sometimes, he's like, tells me the week before a race, he's like, okay, do rest as much as possible. And I just laugh at him. And I'm like, yeah, there's no resting with kids around. Like it's life, just like an ultra. Like you're just constantly like on the go and trying to throw it all together and control what you can control, and just kind of leave the rest up to what's going to happen, and just say, well, that part's out of my hands. And
it's funny, the whole ultra community, and I think other runners as well, but I think ultra runners certainly get taxed in that mental game a lot more. But I was messaging back and forth with a friend today, and she's an ultra runner, and we weren't even talking running, but she was talking, it's been a hard weekend, I've started this new job, on. And then, at the end, she said, but I just trust, that at the end of the race, the finish line's going to be all worth it. I mean, just throwing out race analogies, but we weren't even talking.
Yeah.
But you get it, you kind of.
And it's funny. I also find that I make decisions really quick. Like I'm a very matter of fact person. It's like, if there's a decision made, I'm like, okay, what are the choices? A, B, C. Okay, I pick this one. Done. Move on. Go. And it's interesting because my husband's a much more, he tends to weigh the options more, and he takes some longer time to make decisions. And I'm kind of like, I've moved on to the next thing when he's still, trying to pick the paint color or whatever. And I think a lot of that has to do with ultras or races where it's like you come to like a situation, it's raining or you have a blister on your foot or whatever, and you need to deal with the situation and just move on and forget about it. And I think that I have done that so much more in my life in general since I started running these races. It's something that I've actually talked to my therapist about and told her, I'm like, I really think it's because I run ultras, is that I just like make these decisions and I'm like, okay, on to the next thing.
I was curious if that is something that's developed in you since you took up running, or were you always sort of that way?
I think it's something that's more developed since I took up running. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember what I was like 20 years ago, really, but
join the club. I think I've always kind of been that way, but I'm sure it's more so now. And I don't know. I think it's I personally think it's a strength.
Yeah. Well, I would be really curious to see a study or some kind of questionnaire or something from ultra runners. Do you make decisions quickly in general in your life, or things like that?
And then how do they work out for you? Like, are you any worse off because you didn't shop, you didn't comparison, you didn't lay out all pros, cons? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, maybe sometimes I'm a little short-sighted in decisions about things, but I guess I'm the kind of person who's like, okay, it's today and it matters today, and I'm not going to worry about 5 years from now type of thing.
Right. No, I think I love the whole mental piece of, especially the ultra runner. So you did kind of single out the ultra community. What is it about that community that speaks to you, or just makes you want to be a part of it?
I think in general, people are very supportive, no matter if you're fast, if you're slow. I love the fact that the people who win the race have complete and utter respect for the last finisher of the race. And I have heard many times saying, in a 100-mile race, somebody might finish in, I don't know, 14, 15 hours, but they have a ton of respect for the person who finished just under the cutoff or even after the cutoff, and they're like, that was a much harder job than I did. They were out there for twice as long or whatever. I really love how it seems like everybody is kind of in it together. Yeah. And if you meet somebody on the trail, even if you don't have the same political views or you don't have the same ethical views or what, you share the experience. And if you're out of water, somebody's probably going to say, have some of mine. And I think it's almost like, was it saying it takes a village to raise the kids and everything. I feel like an ultra running community is a village. Yeah. And when you pull into an aid station at an ultra race, the majority of the aid station workers are going to do whatever it takes, including lie to you and tell you you look fantastic. Right. And like you have like lie to you about how much time you have or whatever they need to say to you to get you to stay in the race and keep going. And I think it's everybody kind of working towards that common goal. And I just really like how inclusive it is and how supportive.
I said, one of the really cool things, so the Georgia Jewel, they had typically they bus everybody out to the starting line and then everybody runs back. Well, with COVID, they just couldn't justify packing everybody in buses, so they had to make it an out and back. Mm-hmm. They have a 100-mile, 50-mile, 35-mile, and then a shorter 18-mile. The 100-milers started on Friday. The 50-milers started earlier on Saturday, and then my 30, and it's 35, but it turned into 37. We started a couple hours after all of that. Mm-hmm. But I said the really cool thing was, and I'm slow, so by the time I got out and was getting ready to turn around and come back, on my way out, some of these elite 150 100-milers and 50-milers, they were on their way back to the finish line. Mm-hmm. And every single one of them took time to stop and say, hey, you got this, man. You got, I felt like I should be applauding them and like, holy cow, I'm seeing some of these really fast. And there was not one person who did not say, you got this. You're doing great. Like they knew this is a guy just going to be struggling to finish. They knew that. And I think that's why they won. I think you could feel like, man, they were, it wasn't a courtesy. I mean, they were mm-hmm. truly in it. They, like you mm-hmm. said, it was that's a beautiful analogy. That whole, it takes a village. I think they wanted to do their part to make sure I finished. So no, mm-hmm. I found something in that community, and especially on the trails, although I've never run an ultra off a trail, but I found something in that community I never found in the shorter road races. And there's really good people. I mean, I've met really good people in those.
Right.
But I think it is that, I mean, it just takes something. People, running 100 miles or 50 miles or some of these, or even like for me, it might as well be 100 miles when I'm out mm-hmm. there trying to cover. People really, it takes something extra just to get it done.
Yeah. And I think it also, I think, well, I would hope that people, if you've gotten to the start line of an ultra, you've done training, you've put in the miles, especially if you're doing one like that race or, harder, more technical or in the mountains. And I think you all you could look at each other and say, you've been through a lot to get here. And yes, that's the same for a marathon. But I think that I don't know, it's something about ultra runners who seem to embrace the weirdness and it's just like.
It is a different type of person.
And I think a lot of people, at least I would say majority, maybe at least half of my friends that are ultra runners are coming from some kind of background of that they're trying to work something out in their life, like whether it be an addiction or a trauma. It's like you find something, a way to work through. It's almost like a different form of therapy, basically, to me at least. And I think that people kind of find a camaraderie in that.
That's fascinating that you say that. I've said that before to people and doing these, and you just described my story. So that's me. And I didn't take up running to do this, but I discovered that's what I was doing out there the more I did it.
Right.
I was like, that's why I've been drawn to this. But my friend Jenny Baker, who is the race director of the Georgia Jewel, I interviewed her a couple of times. But one time I asked her, what's the most rewarding part of being the race director of this ultra, you know? And I thought for sure I was just going to get some routine, you know, oh, just seeing these people cross the finish line or just seeing people, you know, accomplish their goals. No, she said the most rewarding part is knowing and hearing about people who have these vulnerable conversations with each other or with themselves out there, that you just get to the point where you got nothing but this vulnerability in you. And that's where people start being them. They let this stuff, what a powerful answer. I mean, it was true, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I have talked, yeah. I mean, I have, you know, met people at races or just during, you know, group runs or something that I never run before. And then all of a sudden you're talking about some very personal things. And I mean, I've talked to people about, things that they probably wouldn't maybe even tell their close friends.
Right.
And it's just something about the running and the sharing the miles and knowing that you'll run and you'll share these things, then you'll walk away and it'll kind of be left there on the trail,
right. Yeah.
you know, and between the two of you or the little group of you or whoever, but you're not going to, it's kind of knowing that like, okay, that was the time we shared together and you're not going to, I mean, at least for me, I'm not like, oh, they're going to go out and run and tell all these people that I was, you know, exposing my vulnerability or whatever.
Right.
But
no, I say one of the main reasons I think I do these podcasts, and you're a little bit of the exception to this, although maybe you're not. Most people who are out running these races, their story isn't, I think I can win this race. You know, there's very few people in our race who are there thinking I have a chance to win this thing. And so what fascinates me then is like, what the heck it's a race. So what the heck are the rest of these people doing there if there's no chance for them to win? There's no, I mean, that's me. I'm never lining up in a race where there's a chance for me to win unless I'm the only guy in it. So
see if you can.
That's right.
To challenge yourself. That's the main, like, number one, that is my main reason for doing it. It's not to see if I can win or set a personal best. That's great, but it's to see if I can do it. Yeah. And to like, in some ways, I think to be uncomfortable, to show myself that I can get through some really difficult stuff and come out the other side. Yeah.
And I think that's what appeals, why ultra running appeals to me so much is that I don't think I'll ever be speedy fast. I mean, I can get faster, but I'm like, I wonder how far, you know, and I think I can do that longer than I could keep getting faster. So yeah, there is just this curiosity of like, you know, 38 miles at that Georgia Jewel. I mean, when I was done, I told Jenny, save me a spot as a volunteer or at an aid station next year. I'm done with this. I'll never do it again. But then now I'm like already thinking.
I was going to say, when did you change your mind?
Yeah. Well, when I signed up for this 24-hour race in Tennessee with this whole idea in mind, okay, now if I could get close to 50 in this race, it'll be close to Jewel registration time for next year, and maybe I'd have the confidence but you know, and I knew it, but so I read something about you. This told me a little bit about you too. I think it was back in Chicago in 2012. You helped a visually impaired runner finish his 12th marathon. He had a goal of running 12 marathons in 12 months. You helped him run that 12th one. You were his guide. And
I helped him run, I think it was his 10th one. We ran together.
Okay, and he had a goal to get
yes.
12 of them.
Yes.
And wherever I read this, you said it was one of your most memorable running experiences.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because I helped him reach this huge goal. I didn't know him. I can't remember how I ended up getting like hooked up with that situation, but he was trying to raise money, or he was raising money for, I think I'm pronouncing it correct, is choroideremia. It's a eye degeneration that's hereditary, and he had basically a tunnel vision, and he wasn't really a runner before attempting this 12 marathons in 12 months thing, but he wanted to raise money. And so he was looking for a guide. He had another one. And so the two of us, I just remember I lived like 8 miles from the start line. So I ran downtown, and then I met him at the start, and we started 5 minutes before the rest of like the elite runners and everything. And I just remember the entire elite runner pack running, just flying by us. And it was pretty cool. And we took turns. He had a towel that he would hold, and then one of us would hold the towel, and one of us would run behind him and say, like, turn 90 degrees to the left or 90 degrees to the right. Now, I was really nervous about it because I hadn't ever done this before. It was the Chicago Marathon. So it was like 40,000 people. I mean, it's a packed race. You know, it's not the Richmond Marathon's, you know, it's decently big, but Chicago Marathon is like your little sardines, and every turn you have to like just go with the flow. And so there were a few spots where I was like, oh my God, he's going to trip and fall, or people would just cut right in front of him, even though we had, you know, he had a sign on him, and we would say blind runner. And it was just helping him. He had a rough time. He ran the first half, and then he ended up walking almost the whole second half, but every once in a while I'd be like, okay, we're running now. And then he would run a little bit. And so we ended up finishing in like, I think it was just shy of 7 hours. And I had a great time out there. And I was just he had some low points, and he's, oh, my hips hurt and this and that. He never said, I'm going to quit, but he definitely was having some negative talk. And to see him get to the finish line and know that I helped him, and not just with that one race, but I helped him with this much bigger goal, was just so rewarding. It's one of the reasons I do coaching for sports backers. And I used to do marathon coaching in Chicago for it's Chicago Area Runners Association. So I started doing coaching for them. And then when I moved here, I started doing it for sports backers. And it's the main reason it's, if I had to not race anymore and just coach, I would do that in a heartbeat. There's something about helping someone else achieve their goal that I just really enjoy. And I don't know if have you seen the coaches on the course at the Richmond Marathon?
Yes. Yeah.
So it is like Christmas. It's like, I yell at them, the runners, especially in the last mile. I cry. I've probably cried like 8 times last year, like helping people either finish or just get their personal best time. It's just something that I just absolutely love.
Yeah, I can relate to it. I mean, I wasn't a part of the training team, but just because at Richmond, that's where I finished my first marathon. It was absolutely life-changing. I mean, I was emotional. So I can't imagine if there was somebody, well, there were friends there who were crying. Right. They were invested in it. So I can't imagine if I'm somebody who's invested my Saturdays into somebody like me who's just has this goal or dream of finishing a marathon. That's got to be rewarding.
It is. It's great. And it's also, I mean, in a way I don't know, in a way it's a little selfish because I'm like, in a way I'm doing this from like, because it makes me feel good, but I don't know, maybe that's just my,
Yeah, but I
my
don't know
thought.
that, you and maybe some of the coaches, well, I hope you do understand the magnitude of that. Because for me, and I've probably discovered this more as I go on, but I knew a little bit of it in the moment that
Mhm.
I tell people when I crossed that finish line, I really fully expected that it was going to be all about, man, look what I just did, just celebrating, man, I didn't think I could do it. I did it. And sure, there was some of that, but the
Mhm.
bigger piece of that was, holy cow, what am I capable of? I never
Yep.
dreamt I could do this. What is it that what have I been holding out on? And I mean,
Yeah.
it was like this big door opened up. This podcast, I would have never done this. I would
Right.
never reach out and say, hey, Whitney, can I interview you? And never. This is one.
Right.
And there's been so many of those things in my life. So you're out there helping facilitate these ripples in a world where I think we need some ripples right
Yeah.
now.
I
Goodness.
think that's a really good point. Like, I didn't really think about this, but I think a big reason why I coach is because it's brought me so much, like, to me personally, running and running marathons, that I want, if it's going to bring somebody else as much joy and really just really love the time that they do spending it, and then if I can encourage somebody to get that much out of it as I do, then I think that's also a big part of why I coach, is to, like, look at this great world out there. Like,
Right.
you can be part of it too.
Right.
And yeah, some people do it in a marathon. They're like, not for me. But I would say the majority of our runners, they do their first one and they come back.
Yeah. And even if they
We've
don't,
had,
I mean, even if you've done it, your life's been changed. Now,
yeah,
it may not be that, you're suddenly dreaming of running 100 miles on the Capitol Trail with Whitney, but
right.
I mean,
Well, and it's interesting because I do have some runners who are like, wait, that exists? Like, what? They're like, you could run 100 miles, and I tell them about, and then it puts, I mean, that's how you learn. That's how you get ultra
yeah.
runners, is they never knew about it before, and then they hear about it, and they're like, oh, I wonder if I could do that too. One of the coaches that one of my coaches, I coach the Orange team, and he is going to do his first 13-hour race this weekend, and I mean, I think he's known ultras are before, but I don't know if he's done one. So it's like, my runners are kind of more used to, they're like, oh yeah, I know what this ultra thing is now. Whereas before, a couple of years ago, they're like, you do what? And now they're just kind of used to it. But I think it's, a few people have asked me, like, I have another runner who did the 50K last year. And then he said, hey, I think I want to do 100K. And so if that opens the door for them just by knowing about it through me, then that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, so I am curious then. You're goal driven. What
Mm-hmm.
do you have? Like, what are your sort of short term, long term goals? I mean, because I always want, like, you get into the mind of somebody who's, been on the 24-hour national team. You just ran, 103 miles on the Capitol Trail in less than a day. Like, what do you go to bed dreaming about? Like, what's your big running
Well,
dream?
I actually have a 100-mile race in West Virginia next Saturday. It's a new race. It's called the Rim to River 100, and it's like 85 or 90% trail, somewhat technical, like 13,000 feet of gain and loss. So I've never actually done a real mountain trail 100. I've
Oh,
done
wow.
more like rail trail type things, like some hills, but nothing like this. And so I'm signed up for it because I'm kind of like scared to do it. So it's like, I got to do this. I'm kind of scared, super excited,
That's awesome.
and just ready for the adventure. And so I'm going to do that. And I have no idea how, I mean, ultimately I just want to finish. I'm definitely afraid of running at night in the woods.
Right.
I have a friend who's going to run a little bit with me, but I'm going to have to run some by myself. I mean, there might be other runners out there, but it's an out and back. So, and it's not, I can't remember how many people, but they're doing a wave start type of thing. And so I'm doing that. And then I'm not sure. I have a spot for Desert Solstice, the race that I qualified for the 24-hour team 3 years ago. I have a spot for that race, but it's in Arizona in December. And so I signed up with kind of, we'll see what happens. I don't know with, COVID going on and everything, but I would like to try to make the 2021 team. Now, I have no idea if they're going to be able to have the World Championships.
Right.
Who knows? But I think I would be regret not trying to make it. The cutoff, the deadline to qualify is like mid or end of December. So it's really, there's not very many races to try to qualify. They have to be, certified and sanctioned and all these things. So they're probably gonna have to do a negative COVID test for this race. It's on a track, it's an invitation. So there's like 20 or 30 runners. And then you probably get like 1 or 2 crew people. Usually you can have whoever you want show up basically, but I'm sure they'll have more restrictions. So that's still kind of up in the air, but my ultimate goal is to run enough miles to get on the top 6 and get on the team, whether it be this December or in the next, 2 years. They only do the World Championships every 2 years. So, yeah. So, and I would like to do more, depending on how this mountain 100 goes. I would like to do more of those. I think as my kids get older and I can drive to Charlottesville or, out to the mountains and train more. But as of right now, I pretty much only get to Buttermilk. Have you been to the Buttermilk? Yeah. And that's as technical as you can get around here.
Yeah. No, I was curious. I was going to ask you. I mean, that's when I did that race in Georgia two years ago. I had gone to Charlottesville a couple of times and run the trails over there, but I said, there's no way I'll ever be able to be ready for this race running. I live in Ashland.
Right.
So the only elevation in Ashland's my front porch. Like, how am I ever going to, and I ultimately discovered Poor Farm Park. They have this amphitheater and they have like 169 steps. So I just,
oh, really? I know of the park. I've never been there.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
It's actually, it's a good kept secret. I love going up there, but those steps became my, love hate relationship. But
have you ever been to or heard of Jarman's Gap Road up in Crozet?
Yes.
Yeah. So I ran that I ran like a marathon distance last Saturday. It's mostly on the James River trails. And then I went to Jarman's Gap. It's this dirt road. It's almost 3 miles up. It's like 1,500 feet up. So if you go up and down, I went up and down twice and a little bit more, but there's a section you're going down. I mean, you really can beat your quads up, which is that was the goal.
Right.
And there's a section where you're going down and I couldn't have stopped myself if I tried. And I was just like, please don't fall. I'm just envisioning myself flying through the air, total road rash all over my body type of thing. But that's a really good, if you want to get some up and down elevation. That's great.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I'm excited for you. I'll be curious to follow that journey.
I'm excited, nervous, all of it.
Did you follow any of the whole backyard ultra last weekend? Does that?
Yeah, I didn't. I wasn't checking it every
appeal
hour.
to you at all, or?
If I had the time, yeah. But I always thought, I'm like, how do these people, like, they must have kids, because even the virtual one there was a virtual one in the beginning of the spring.
Yeah. And
I was like I know these people are coming back to their house, but I'm like, what do they do if they have kids? Like, but no, I mean, that's a whole different type of challenge. I was explaining that to somebody actually when I was running with my training group on Saturday, and they're like, that's it, just like 4.12 miles or something every hour. I'm like, yeah, but they're doing that for like 3 days straight.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you can't, it's like you get like a 5-minute nap maybe if you
Right.
could sleep. Yeah, that's a
Such a
cool.
mind. That's such a, I mean, it's all a mind game, but that gets to
Right.
be like a crazy mind game.
And what's so interesting is that the majority of runners in that are friends, and then but they're also, so they're there pushing each other,
Yeah.
hoping that each other stays in it, but then at some point they're probably hoping the other one drops
Right.
out.
Right. Well, and this year I thought that was fascinating because, you know, it was down to, well, because they, with the COVID, they had all these branches all over the world. So people are
Uh-huh.
doing it. And so, you know, to win it, you had to, and if you're down like Harvey and Courtney were down to the last two, you know,
Yeah.
you got to stay in, not only to help her or him win, but to compete with
The other
the
people,
other
yes.
folks in the world. It's like,
Yeah.
talk about the pressure. And like when you're, I mean, I can't even, like, you know,
Well, and it was
68 hours into it or whatever. I'm like, how are you even
well,
up?
it's so interesting because that rate, like, it's not like there's no money involved.
Right.
It's not, it's turned into this kind of like cult following type of
Yes.
race situation, but it's not like a comrades or Western States, you know, type
Yeah.
of thing. It's just like literally backyard
Right.
race that has turned into this thing that people are just kind of obsessed with, and people are making other races like it.
No, right. No, and I thought it was such a good, you know, I saw one of the videos and it was getting late, you know, in it where probably to where you were saying is like, okay, you got to drop, you know.
Yeah.
But there they were, you know, at the starting line, just two of them fist bumping,
Mm-hmm.
and like it was like two buddies, you know. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. I mean, it goes back just to that community.
Yeah,
And
and I think it's interesting, those, like, a lot of the people that were in it were on the 24-hour national team at one point together, so they're teammates. So they know each other. And also the 24-hour running community is quite small as far as the competitive one, and like you'll kind of, you know, desert solstice, and then there's another like dusk to dawn to dusk, and then these different races where you'll see each other at, and I've gotten to know people's crews because they have the same crew, and my husband has, you know, gotten to know other crew people, and so you build this this little community. So they're used, like, even on the 24-hour competitive, like, you're doing a race and you're cheering other people on, even though it's interesting because they might, like, their distance that they run might knock you out of a spot, but yet you are cheering, you want them to succeed. You don't want to see them fall apart. So it's a very, I don't know, it's an interesting, like, I don't know if that's so much in the like competitive marathoning or 10K or whatever sport. I really don't know because I've never been in that environment really, but it just seems like it's such a niche to that group of people. Oh.
yeah, no, I think it goes back to, you know, what you said and what Meg said. I think this whole, I'm, I think I'm curious how far I can go. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I think that curiosity carries over into, like, I'm curious how far he or she can go too. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I can imagine it at 68 hour or whatever they were in. I mean, it was on the third day, you know.
Yeah.
At some point, I mean, you're just like awed by each other, and you
Yeah.
just,
I just want to know the sleep strategies. Like, do you try to take a nap every couple laps for 5 minutes, or do you, like,
I was reading the one Runner's World article right before I was killing time, getting ready for you, and Courtney was saying she was taking like 8-minute naps every lap, you know, so it'd be
oh, okay.
8 to 10 minute naps, and she said like at night she had trouble sleeping, and I'm like, how do you
You know what?
8 minutes I would have trouble. I don't know.
Those races, like, I've never taken a nap during a race, but I could not sleep after 100, like 50 miles. Yeah, okay. But like 100-miler or the 24-hour race, I can't sleep till the next night. Like I'll finish on Saturday night or early Sunday morning at like 1 or 2 a.m. I can't sleep till Sunday night or even Monday sometimes because there's so much adrenaline. I think so I just don't know how I don't see myself being able to say, run, finish that loop. Okay, take a nap, wake up, go. Like I just don't, I mean, maybe your body's so tired that you can, but I've never.
I could see me taking a nap. I just don't see anybody getting me back up. If I'm especially once you're like over 200 miles into it, I'm like, how do you think something would just take over when you fell asleep? But
I mean, she did run like 300 some miles on the Colorado Trail a month, 2 months ago or something. She's trying to do the FKT of I think it was the Colorado Trail. Yeah. So she had some miles in her legs, but still.
No, well, but it's amazing. I talk to, folks that, you all who do the 24 hours and then folks who do the 48 hours. And, they always say, oh, the sleep deprivation isn't the hardest part. So I don't know. It would seem like it would be to me.
Yeah, I think you can get away with like 24 hours no sleep. I do recall Courtney did the Moab 240. Was it 2 years ago maybe? And she said she took like a 20-minute nap the whole time or something. That's great. Like I don't know. Maybe I just like sleep too much.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I know it's getting late, so I am so this has been great. I'm everybody I've ever talked to has really spoke really high of you. So I was anxious once I read about your Capitol Trail feats. I thought, I'm going to reach out and see if I can talk to you. And this turned out to be every bit as good as I hoped it would be.
Did Meg, who you interviewed last week, did she do her FKT yet?
Yes, she did. So there was nobody had ever she's the fastest woman to do it because no woman had ever done the out and back. Only 3 men had. But so yeah, she did it in 52 hours. It was 144 miles, 18,000 feet of elevation gain each way. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't imagine. But
each way, yeah, wow.
So
yeah. Congrats to her. I don't know her, but congrats to her.
Yeah. No, she's pretty impressive herself as a runner. She won the 100-mile at the Georgia Jewel 2 years ago. She had second, first female in the 50-mile this year. So she's like you, she's gifted. You all are in a whole different realm.
Sometimes it's just maybe a tiny bit of gift, a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
And a lot of determination.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big piece of it. But well, I wish you luck. The rim to river. I'm going to.
Yeah, I'll let you know how it goes.
I will. I'll be curious to see if you're like, become a trail mountain nighttime junkie after that.
I don't know at the nighttime because I think with the kids I just need my sleep. But trail, yeah, that could probably happen.
Well, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Well, hey, all, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Whitney Richman. I loved it. We are wishing her luck on her run next weekend, the Rim to River 100. I will be excited to hear what she finds out about her love for the trails and the mountains and the climbing. And maybe we'll catch back up with her after that conversation. But plenty of good conversations coming up in the future. I am grateful to be back having these conversations. They really impact my life. My hope is that they somehow impact yours, that the stories of these folks digging deep, Whitney talking a lot about just this mental toughness and how we all really have this capacity to continue building this mental toughness we have in our life and applying that to running or really any other physical endeavors that we take on, but more importantly, how that all equips us to, get through these days a little bit better. We are living in some tough and challenging times, and it's our mental toughness some days that allows us to prosper through those challenges. So I appreciate Whitney for joining us today. Come back next time when I'm sure there will be even more stories to push us along in our runs, help us along in life. You all have a great day and a great weekend.